All right, hello everyone. Welcome to today's Worspa Icon Series live stream, the ninth entry in the series now. We're very excited to have you here with us today. As always, your host is Worspa Community Envoy Matt Petrick, and joining him today, very special guest, John Georges, former master distiller at Trinidad Distillers, the makers of Angostura rum. Matt's going to give you the extended introduction to John in just a second. But before we dive in, I'm Will Hookinga from Zavvy.co. As always, just want to point out a few ways that you can interact and send in questions, things like that throughout the show today. So on your right, as many of you have already discovered, you'll see a chat box. So feel free to just say hello. Let us know where you're joining us from around the world. It's always really cool to see where people are tuning in from. If you do have a question for John or for Matt throughout the show, there's a little button at the bottom of the screen that says ask a question. So just click or tap that button and enter your question in. Matt will be keeping an eye out for those throughout the show. And last but not least, feel free to invite anyone you know to join us. There's a share button at the top that makes it easy to do that. But Matt, with all that said, I'll turn things over to you now.
Yeah, thank you, Will. A pleasure to be here as always, and continuing to be a habit we keep indulging here. I'm incredibly excited to have John Georges here with us. He is part of our Icon series. This is the 50th anniversary of Worspa, which started in 1971. For those of you who are still not familiar with Worspa, is the West Indies Rum and Spirits Producers Association, a collective organization that advocates for Caribbean rum in general, for the countries the independent countries that make up Caribbean rum. We are the vocal advocate in things like trade policy and stuff. And so having done that for 50 years, we wanted to look back a little bit. And one of our efforts has been this Icon series, where we talk to people who have been in the rum industry, in our member distilleries for a very long time, and have a lot to share and celebrate with us as rum is continuing to premiumize and gain more respect in the international community. So we've talked to some amazing people like Evan Brown and Joy Spence and Margaret Montplaisir, and it's a complete honor to have John here as well. I first met John in Trinidad in the before times, just before COVID hit. I was down in Trinidad in December of 2019, and John not only took me around the Angostura or Trinidad Distillers Ltd distillery, Angostura, but we also spent the day bouncing around the countryside of Trinidad, and of course, I made a special request to go to the Caroni distillery, and John obliged, and so we got to see that, as well as a tour of past some sugar factories. This is what the rum nerd of me likes to do. So I'm very grateful for John for indulging that, and for also his wonderful conversations. It's just a joy to talk to John. So John, thank you for being with us today.
Matt, thank you very much for that weird introduction, but it's all good. We had a lot of fun. It was great to meet you, and it's rum, and it's pride and passion. So I was more than happy to show you about.
Well, thank you. So let's jump right in here. First question, tell us about your life before you got into the rum industry. Like, what was it like growing up, and what did you think you were going to be doing? Fill us in.
I had no clue. Well, what can I say? Born Trinidadian, and born somewhere in South Trinidad. My family and I left Trinidad for a short while, but then I was back in the early 70s in time to go to secondary school. And very English style secondary school, and you study things, you just enjoy life, and you study everything. And then at a certain age you get to choose, typically, whether you're going to some sort of environment which will be sort of English, history, geography, or something scientific. And that's when my old man stepped in, and clearly, even though he was a well-respected jurist and so on, he clearly didn't see a lawyer in me. So he said, if you're not going to be a lawyer, you better be some sort of scientific kind of guy, you know. So at the very early age, this is when somewhere around 15, 16, maybe 16 or 17, you get to choose. And I chose scientific subjects, chemistry, physics, mathematics, no biology, because I was fairly sure that I was not going to be any kind of doctor. And there you go, you do that. As a young man in the Caribbean, you do all the stuff that Caribbean people do. Go to the beach, go hiking, play football, cricket, enjoy yourself, enjoy your life, and until it comes to that day when you decide what you're going to do. So having done that and got to the time when it's time to go to university, another decision to be made. What are you going to do? So I chose engineering. Again, the potential, this is Trinidad and Tobago, and we are an oil and gas, oil refining, gas processing country. And again, decisions, electrical, chemical, mechanical, civil, what are you going to do? And I suppose I felt greatest affinity for chemistry. So I chose chemical engineering, not realizing that chemistry and chemical engineering are related, but only tenuously. And oil and gas was supposed to be where I would end up, you know, oil and gas. But I was very, very lucky, and I avoided that. Got in the rum business.
Right. So what did so right before you worked in rum, what were you doing? Like what was your sort of lead up to that?
Well, this is the thing, you know, and in life, economics dictate everything. And at the time, I was graduating the University of West Indies right here at St. Augustine, a degree in chemical engineering. The Trinidad and Tobago were undergoing a bit of a recession. Things were tough. Not a lot of growth in Trinidad just yet, so that for a year I could not get a job in engineering. I went to a number of interviews, even made the second tier, but didn't quite get it. Refining, gas processing, even cement, no luck. But in the interim, I got a job. I was a salesperson. I was involved in selling lab equipment, insecticides, that sort of thing, just something to keep body and soul together. And what at the time was beer money. Now, somebody's got to buy. I have to pay for my own beer.
Right.
But eventually, a year after I graduated, and about a month before my 23rd birthday, I got a call. I had seen an advertisement in the newspaper for a factory manager at Angostura. Now, this was fascinating because I had visited Angostura as a student, and at the time there was just this one engineer, and he looked young enough, and I thought, well, they don't need more than one. It's just the one distillery, and you know, who's going to get this? You know, and it never came up, but there it was, and I applied, and what can I say? The rest is history. I'm in the rum business.
So when was that roughly? Like when did
that
you?
was about 1982. 1982, and until there, I was an avowed beer drinker primarily. But I have to say this, and so much respected father can know that I did respect. He made the meanest rum punch. His rum punch was the first I ever tasted that was made with overproof rum. And it was a serious rum punch. I would sip it, and that would be enough. I was still a little young, not developed, didn't appreciate it, but as time went by, I grew to appreciate it. So before I knew about rum, but I didn't ever think I would end up in the rum manufacturing business.
Right. So Angostura hires you in circa 1982. What was it like? Like you sort of thrown into the melee. What was that like? What was going on?
It was very weird. It was very convenient. It's a 20-minute ride from home, so I jump into my car and over the hill I go, and at the time Angostura was operating two distilleries. They had purchased the Fernandes distillery, and they had their own distillery running at just up the street around the corner in Laventil. And I was thrown into the Fernandes distillery, which was still running at the time. A beautiful old building, old structure, well, not really, just old, old school stuff. It was fascinating. And as I was looking through, remembering this thing, I remember that the first thing I was actually called to do was prepare time cards for shift workers so that they could get paid the following weekend.
Right.
But that's what it was like. You jumped in there and you did everything. You were responsible for everything. And it was my first real so-called engineering job. And it was a little fascinating to find myself bright and early on a Monday morning having to do time cards.
Right. So was it like where you got to jump in and immediately start creating things, or was it more of a?
Of course not. I mean, okay, I'm in distilling and so on. So I sort of get to my old textbooks and read up on McCabe feel and phase diagrams, thinking, okay, this is an engineering job. I need to remind myself about distilling. But you quickly discover that particularly chemical engineering is about keeping the rum, and in this case, rum running. And it's everything around it. The designs have been done, the still is running. But you know what keeps the still running? Pumps, compressors, boilers, and most interesting, human beings.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
You've got to get all of these things working together to keep the rum running, and that was that's a quick learning curve.
Right. So it's not so much standing by the still, sipping rum coming off. It's more about why is this pump not working?
Exactly. Why is this pump not working? Who didn't come to work? Why don't I have? And you in Angostura you are responsible for it all. It's not as though there were a lot of guys there doing and what made things even more interesting is my supervisor, who would have sort of helped me out. He wasn't there on that first Monday, so the next guy up was me. No one cared that I had just arrived today. We need the paperwork. I remember it very distinctly. I get a call from a guy in accounts. Georges, where are the time cards? What? Time cards. We need the time cards to pay these people. What? Buckle down, get it done.
There you go. So you joined Angostura. When you joined Angostura, it was about a decade or so after Angostura bought Fernandes. Can you? And I know some of it was before your time, but can you share sort of what your recollections are of what happened to that distillery eventually, and maybe why Fernandes sold it to Angostura? Like it's an area of interest to a lot of people, and I think you were at least around for part of that time. Share with us.
It is fascinating. Of course, these were changing times for Angostura, and they had got into this deal with Fernandes, and what they needed was capacity. They were doing bulk rum and they needed capacity, and they had begun to build a new distillery. The first distillery Angostura ever had was fine. It's a great still, made wonderful rum, but didn't have the capacity. So the first thing to do was get Fernandes to bump up their capacity, and while they were doing that, they built another distillery to provide additional capacity. Apparently Bacardi was quite, needed rum, and this was really about capacity.
Right.
The original distiller, I suppose distilling executive, a gentleman called Ronnie Llanos, had made some modifications to the Fernandes still to speed it up a little bit, make it a little bit more efficient, make it do a little bit more. And unfortunately, at that time, we were, so busy with making rum, I had no chance to understand what was done, what was there before. I was young, barely 23, as I said, and it was all about making rum. And shock of all shocks, not much more than a year after I joined, the whole dynamics changed, the economics changed. I think there was a particular market, and if I'm not wrong, I think it had to do mostly with Canada. Canada sort of changed their trading arrangements, and one of the fallouts of that was they decided would shut down the Fernandes distillery. Now, Fernandes themselves were long out of the business. It would seem as though, even though Mr. Fernandes, JB himself, was quite passionate about rum, perhaps his family weren't. And I think it's clear. I believe his son now is in the wine business, so he obviously went that way. And this was just everything coming together really nicely. I think he wanted to get out. Angostura wanted to go deeper. The two of them came together, and here we are.
Right. And this was also, if I recall correctly, somewhat driven. The capacity demand was driven somewhat by like Bacardi becoming involved in this. Can you share? We'll get more about that later, but share us a little bit now, like the Bacardi portion of this.
The Bacardi thing was fascinating, and the stories I hear. When I joined Angostura, it was strange. There was just the one Seagert left. Gordon Seagert was a marketing director at Angostura. And every once in a while, if you found him at the right time, he might share a story or two. And I remember one of his stories concerning that whole purchase. Mr. Fernandes was a curmudgeon guy, and really what tipped the whole thing over was that he thought he would never sell to Angostura. I'm sure Angostura tried before, but he wouldn't sell to Angostura. But throwing in Bacardi's name, and he thought, well, okay, clearly somebody respects what I'm doing.
Okay.
If Bacardi are buying me, it must be respectful. Right. And that was a little anecdote that Gordon shared with us. But the point was that, capacity was the name of the game. They definitely needed to have more rum to do this, because we weren't. Initially, they were selling, shipping stuff by containers. And by the time I got there, they had not too long just built an entire port so that we could be shipping spirit by literally shipping in ships. Right. and that was quite fascinating. Really, the name of the game was keep the liters coming, keep the quality up. And it's interesting to have ship pressure. When a ship comes alongside, they don't want to leave with anything but a full load.
Right, for sure. So, what was the Angostura corporate culture like when you joined? What was the Angostura culture like?
Ooh, it was fascinating. Again, with zero experience in a lot of corporate worlds, Angostura was, if you wanted a reasonably gentle introduction into the corporate world, this was it. For the most part, people were very friendly and kind. The environment. I met a lot of people who were there for many years, and most were my particular supervisor, a gentleman called Noel Grant. He was extremely helpful. The other thing I noticed, there were a lot of there were a couple father-son situations. There were, many brothers were working there, so that, you got this impression that recruitment was, let's start with people we know first, or the people who come directly recommended. And that made me a little bit weird. I didn't know anybody there. I thought this was kind of strange, but there was the beginnings of moving away from that as the distillery expanded. There were a couple of younger operators who had not too long come to Angostura who had no family, but you could tell that it was the beginning of a change. But still, It's the way we refer to the Angostura family. It's always been that way.
Right. Oh, good. So another gentleman who was around at that time was a Trinidad legend, and actually one of the founding fathers, I would say, of WRSPA was Tommy Gatcliffe. Tell us about Tommy and sort of what he contributed.
Tommy, at the time I was there, he was the chairman of the board, and yes, he was played a big part in the whole Bacardi arrangement. And that Bacardi arrangement was really predicated on trading arrangements, because Bacardi needed rum from a so-called ACP country to get into Europe duty free. But it wasn't all plain sailing. There were issues with what is rum, and this is where I had my opportunity to first interact with Tommy. I was just a strange gap where my immediate boss wasn't there at the time. And so who was running the distillery? Well, this gentleman here, and he wanted to answer questions about how we were distilling and so on. And I got to interact with him, and he was at the time very pleasant, very understanding. And it was nice. It was cool to have someone of that stature interact with you, not as an equal, but at least he was understanding what you were saying. That was fun. And I just happened to come across some of the documentation that he had prepared many, many years ago for the first distillery. And you felt that he was a person who really approached his work methodically, and all the documentation. And you could tell that, yeah, when we expanded, when we created our distillery, a lot of thought went into it and the direction that we were planning to take Angostura. It probably wasn't Bacardi, but certainly it was to create a rum that was a little different from anything in the Caribbean at that time.
Right. And if I remember correctly, you had mentioned it to me at one point that Tommy played a substantial role in sort of keeping Angostura in Trinidad early on.
This is it. Yeah, that's the history. Angostura, is it's a very old company, and trust me, if you get to know the whole history, it's up and down and round and round. It's the strength of the brand alone and the product Angostura bitters, really, that it has just survived many a storm, shall we say?
Right. Yeah.
But this particular one.
Yeah.
Involved a company that wanted to buy Angostura and remove Angostura from Trinidad. At the end of the day, all they were interested in was bitters. And bitters, technically speaking, can be made anywhere. And they wanted to do that. And the story is that at the time, things were really turbulent. Mr. Gatcliffe was not yet, he was just an alternate director. And in those days, these are wonderful old days, the really senior people would get to go to England on long leave, and they're away for 2 months or 3 months. And here was Tommy, relatively new in the business and in charge. And this threat to the organization was real. And no, couldn't Zoom or text or anything like that. So he really took it upon himself to enter into negotiations with the government of Trinidad and Tobago, even though probably he wasn't fully authorized to do that, to stave off that threat, that buy-off threat. And the arrangement was that the government would buy the shares and make sure the company stays in Trinidad. And what Angostura had to do then was to sell back the shares, but make a commitment that the shares would be more broadly distributed, and primarily in this case among the employees at the time. So that was the sort of arrangement that was made. But by that much, Angostura would have been out of Trinidad, and who knows what would have happened.
Right. So essentially, the government preemptively bought Angostura to prevent somebody else from buying it, and then worked out a deal to give it, basically to bring it back to the owners, but with a broader distribution,
with a slightly better shareholding. Yes, it wasn't a massive commitment to give it away, but certainly, come on, share it around a bit more.
Right, absolutely. So we'd already touched briefly upon Angostura, but by that point you joined in 1982, Bacardi was a substantial shareholder. I think my recollection was like a 40% shareholder, substantial.
Well, to be exact, not quite exactly like that. That eventually happened, but the way it worked was Angostura got together with Bacardi to buy Fernandes, and then later on, as things continued to grow, what they did was they resold the Fernandes shares to TDL and bought shares in the Angostura holding, and then they were substantial shareholders.
Okay, good. Thank you.
That way. But that's just the route they got there. But yeah, they were substantial shareholders.
Right.
And fascinating time because Bacardi was the big boy.
Right. Yeah. So what was that like? So when we know that over several decades that several new stills and expansions happened. What was it like having Bacardi? How did it change things, and sort of what were the improvements that they were able to bring to the table?
Well, you've got to understand it was obviously substantial because Angostura had built their first distillery in probably 1947, 48, somewhere around there.
Right.
And it wasn't until this Bacardi situation came around in 1975 or thereabouts that there was going to be a substantial change. And that change was quite a massive change in that we needed to meet the projected Bacardi demand, build an entire new distillery that was probably going to be 3 or 4 times bigger than the one we already had, and it was a massive change, and it was together with Bacardi that we got together with the designers, and I wasn't there for the first one, but we got together with the designers, and they installed the new still, and obviously from 47 to 75 or thereabouts, there had been substantial changes, and a lot of things had to happen for that to take place. And Angostura really were very much supported by Bacardi in that particular venture. And while I was there, that was 75, and the next big change was only 10 years away. By 85, we needed to expand again and to get a little bit more output. And by then, well, I was there. What was interesting about that is that my boss at the time, a gentleman called Peter Chinchong, had decided, well, no more, time for me to go. And he, not too long after we began that situation, we had just commissioned the still, and he thought, his fortunes lay elsewhere. And so that when it came to really getting it up and running and doing it, that fell to me. And this again was a still that Bacardi had built. I think it was in the Bahamas, and they sold it to us, and we installed it here in Trinidad, and that was 85. And that's a lot of fun because initially it was just the one still that was running, and then we had to figure out how to get the 2 stills going together, and it was exciting times. It's fun to just keep the rum running, but it's really a lot of fun to get it going, to start it up.
So there was a third still in 1999. Yes,
1999. Yeah.
What was, I loved it. Like what was the impetus for that?
Well, I mean, this also was a big boy, big girl. I'm not sure how you want to look at it, but this is the last of the stills that we put together, capable of doing what the 2 of them were running. The original still from 1947 was probably formally decommissioned in probably the early 1970s, or fully decommissioned. By the time I got there, pretty much all that was left were fermenters, old fermenters, and not much else. The still was gone, and we were really just running the first iteration of expansion from 1975, and then we got the second 1985, 86, somewhere around there. Then we got the 2 of those going together, And then this one was going to be big enough to put out as much as the two of these stills together, with the idea that we'll run at least 2 out of 3 at any one time to satisfy the market. And what was the market? Was supposed to be breezers.
Mhm.
These breezers apparently demanded a lot of alcohol, and the whole alcohol pop thing started in the UK and in Europe. So again, where are we going to get duty-free alcohol to, continue to supply this? And it was from us initially, definitely from us.
Right.
And up she went, and yeah, we really spat out a lot of rum back in the day. It turned out a lot of rum back in the day.
So certainly Bacardi helped fuel the expansion of the Angus or Trinidad Distillers as where we see it today. How did the Bacardi connection help you personally?
Well, it was for us, all of us particularly. Well, they were the technical crew, which was people in the laboratory and people who were in operations, and because those were the two areas that were most important: distilling, aging, and anything to do with quality control and analysis. They were very keen on that, and they were very keen that anyone who was supplying spirit to them, that we were consistent with what we did, and that we shared any knowledge that we may have had. At the time, Bacardi, aside from obviously the main plant in Puerto Rico, which I visited on a couple of occasions, there was an operation in the Bahamas. There was an operation also in Brazil, and I think there was one in Mexico, which I also had an opportunity to visit once. And those visits were great for me personally. You met other distillers who were doing exactly what you were doing, and you learned a lot from them. And I happen to know our laboratory personnel, anybody to do with analysis, spent a lot of time learning from the Bacardi operation. And if we were planning any sort of development, it was always, you can always call on a couple of the guys in Puerto Rico. One gentleman in particular, Luis Planas, even visited us.
Yeah,
You met Luis, right?
Right? Yes.
Yeah. Luis is a serious guy. He was very, very sharp at everything that he did. And there was a guy, Felix Mateo, who ran the distillery. He was another good guy who really supported us with anything we were trying to do, in not only directly in distilling, but anything to do with keeping the distillery running.
Okay. So so it's fair to say that because you were part of the Bacardi empire, I guess you would say, that sort of gave you a broader experience, broader exposure to the.
Yeah, we were, you had an idea of where, if you were going to develop they had resources which they were really applying to all sorts of things that we could never consider. It was fascinating to deal with an organization that had that not only day-to-day considerations, but they were definitely looking to the future and doing what I would consider genuine research type things on a variety of areas.
Okay. So the end of the late 1990s was sort of an interesting period in Trinidad and Angostura. You got a new owner in CL Financial. A few of us know about that, but their CEO, Lawrence Dupre, he seemed to have ambitious plans for where he wanted the spirits market to go. What was your take on what happened over the next decade or so?
Again, it is these for me fascinating times. It was difficult. If you're in operations, at the end of the day, everything that happens out there somehow comes down to you, and you've got to address the changes that need to be made. And once again, it was changes in the trade trade setups that meant that. And not only that, changes in Bacardi as well. Bacardi had their own views as to how they were going to develop their company, and it meant that Angostura, nice though we were, didn't really play a part in their future, and they were about to give it up. And there you go, Lawrence Dupre comes along. And Lawrence was entrepreneurial by nature, and by then in Trinidad he had done a lot of things, and his name was all over the place as someone who got things done and was very ambitious. And from what I can tell, no more ambitious. He had even bigger ambitions for the spirit business. For some reason, particularly the brand Angostura, as far as he was concerned, everything I ever heard him say was that this is a brand that should be much, much bigger than it is, not only for bitters, but also rum. He could not understand why, previous administrations, if you will, hadn't really taken this a lot further. And he almost took a personal interest in trying to get Angostura beyond what it was. And it was fascinating. It was no longer just churning out liters, which was always interesting, but it was time to put bottles out there.
Right.
And these bottles for him had to be a premium product, not just what we had. And even though in the past Angostura had made some, moves towards that same sort of thing, nothing quite as grand as what Mr. Dupre was thinking. He really was thinking, what can I say? Global domination is that was the way he thought. Whatever he did, it was supposed to be global.
Right.
That was the way he thought.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating.
Right. And just for context for people who aren't familiar with this part of the story, is over the next several years, he and CO Financial had also purchased Appleton Estate and
For a short while, Appleton Estate.
St. Lucia Distillers and E&H here.
Yeah, Burn Stewart in Scotland.
Yeah, and in Dewars, and also, believe it or not, what was or what became MGP, like the large bourbon supplier.
Yeah. I think one of the earlier ones was the one in Florida, which was
Cruzan.
Cruzan.
Yeah.
Yes, Cruzan was one of the early purchases as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, Lawrence had sort of put maybe Diageo in his sights. What can I say?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of fascinating for somebody like me to go look at the Angostura shareholders reports from 2006, 2007, and see all these big names, not only in rum but on other spirits, and see
Yes.
they were all being sort of run under the sort of the Angostura brand,
Yeah.
portfolio.
We almost had Marie Brizard. I mean, it was fascinating.
Right.
Unfortunately, 08 happened.
Yeah, the global financial crisis and
Yes.
everything started to unravel. But I think it's fair to say, based upon what you're telling us, that it was Lawrence who helped sort of put Angostura on that path of like the premium, like the 1919, 1824. Would you agree with that assessment?
Well, certainly he thought that needed to be really front and center of any development that we would do. Angostura we did have 1824, but it was very, very local. Everything was very local, and his goal was he needed to go international. So alongside these brands, we needed more. He pushed the development of everything else, and definitely looked towards international marketing as a way to really grow the organization. First of all, he was definitely promoting bitters, and I don't know if it was the first major cocktail competition ever, but he definitely promoted the so-called Angostura Global Cocktail Challenge. And it was probably one of the earliest cocktail competitions out there. And it was, first of all, very bitter-centric. And then as the rum developed, it was rum and bitters. And the two of them really, really were growing together. He also ensured that orange bitters happened.
Mhm.
When he discovered that orange bitters was key to certain cocktails, he said, "How come we don't have an orange bitters?
Mhm.
Let's get one." Let's
Yeah.
get one. And there it is. We've got an orange bitters. But that was his way of thinking. I remember many years ago, it was quite fascinating because Angostura bitters. It still fascinates me how globally so many people really got into this bitters thing.
Right.
I remember a group came from England once, and these people just came to the house of bitters.
Yeah.
And we were talking about rum and so on and so forth, and it's just the difference. They weren't so sure about this rum thing, you know what I mean? They were definite about bitters, and and even Angostura in some of their early days, there was a big thing to keep rum and bitters separate. Why? I'm not sure, but it was rum and bitters were separate. Made by Angostura, but it was never an Angostura rum. It was a Seagutt's Bouquet, perhaps, and on the local market, it was Old Oak rum and White Oak and brands that did not really carry Angostura. But who knows? I'm not a marketing genius, and at the time they thought this was the way to go, but not Lawrence. Lawrence wanted Angostura on everything because that's what people knew. And he was certain we could parlay bitters, that bitters name and bitters quality and everything that bitters stand for into the rum business.
Yeah. And towards that end, I was incredibly honored. I recently wrote, or recently became known that I wrote the Angostura Bitters entry in the Oxford Companion for Spirits and Cocktails. And
you did?
Yes, that was
okay.
Yeah, and there were some fascinating little discoveries, like the connection to the Wizard of Oz. You have to read the book, or you can search Google, but read the book. There's just a really fascinating connection with the Wizard of Oz. So
it is something that came to me, and when you came to me much later on, because of course, you as they say, when you're knee deep in alligators, you forgot you came to drain the swamp. But not exactly that. That's a bad analogy. But my point is, I never looked back. I needed to look forward, fill the next ship, get the next thing done. And the history of Angostura is awesomely fascinating.
Right.
And wrong one way or the other, you have to be totally amazed at the legwork that went in to making this bitters a global thing.
Right.
And it's there was no internet to spread it. You had to do it with legwork.
Absolutely. So
and they put in a lot of legwork and very dedicated work. You imagine, so that you drew inspiration from that. If someone can take something as, I don't know, just out there as bitters and make it something, definitely we should be able to do something with rum.
Right. Absolutely. And so we're going to go back again. We're sort of like this late 1990s. You told me once that you never considered yourself a master distiller, yet it was around this time and somehow you ended up with this title. So tell us how this happened.
It's a combination of things. It's again serendipitous. You're in Angostura, and you're more concerned about making rum than anything. And then Lawrence Dupre and company come along, and they're very interested in getting an international marketing program up and running. And we at the time we were represented in the UK by a company I believe called Paragon Vinters. And Lawrence, I don't know, Lawrence being Lawrence, said, okay, let's buy that company, because we not only want them to do bitters, we want them to do rum. And before you know it, they're here. They send a crew down to Trinidad because they're all vintners. What do they know about bitters? Was easy. Bitters almost sold itself, and they didn't have to know much about it. When I say it was easy, anyway, another discussion. Bottom
Right.
line is, they came to learn about rum, to understand how they were going to go about marketing rum. And they sent a crew down, and I was deputized to show them around the distillery and everything that we did about making rum. I have no idea why me, but it was me. And so we do a quick tour of the distillery, how rum is made, aging, and stuff like that. And at the end of it all, this guy looks at me and says, "John, you know what? What you just did, I could never do. And this is what we need. We need people to know about rum and to hear you tell them about rum, because I can't do it like you can." For some reason, he's hearing pride and passion. And I'll say this now. I mean, it's always been that way. We in Trinidad have always been, as particularly in the rum industry, really recognized because, of course, oil and gas, dig it out of the ground, that's okay, and you earn foreign exchange. But as a company, as Trinidad making rum, we felt that we were really doing something really special. We were creating this rum at the time from our own sugarcane, our own molasses, and selling it abroad and earning foreign exchange. And that was definitely something everybody wanted to do, but we were actually doing. And it was, a source of great pride for me, and as a Trinidadian, and from a passion point of view, again, the little bit more of the history you read, and you understand that, somehow rum, for no good reason, didn't really hold pride of place in the spirit world. And that irked me. That's not right. We're as good as anybody. So between the two of them, I was more than happy to promote Angostura rum. And this young man, well, not this young man, this is a gentleman called Charles Marshall, if he ever hears it. And I always tell him, say, "Charles, you know what you did? You have no idea the monster you created." Because there it was. And at the time, there were certain things happening in the UK. And in this particular case, it was something called the Bar Show, which, large hall, not only spirit providers, but everything to do with bars, glass, lighting, music, everything. Massive show. "John, you need to come, be in our stall, and you will answer questions about rum and bitters. So you do everything here. You're Angostura's master distiller, and if you come up there, I'll tell them that you're the master distiller, and you'll explain to them what you do and why you do it and how you do it." I said, "Okay, if you say so." And I think he sold the idea because, obviously, being in the wine business, and you can imagine the wine business changed around them as well, in that all sorts of people got involved. And one of his introductions to this sort of approach to marketing was an old Australian inventor, a retired guy who they brought across to the UK to do the same thing, which was explain Australian wines to people who did not understand it. And he said, "You'll be the guy who's going to explain Trinidad rum." And it started there. Made a couple of trips to the UK primarily, initially. And then as things continued to grow, another gentleman called Brian Woods, who was at the time working, when Angostura really had the whole CL thing and a global marketing, Brian said, "John, okay, great. Trips are fine, but what we need is a video. That way we can distribute it. Well, you don't have to go anywhere. We can distribute this video." And without really asking me anything, he says, "We're coming down with a video crew and we're going to do..." What? Okay, let's do it. And the fun part was that they decided they could not give me a script. They wouldn't know what to say. So you just talk and it'll be fine. Really? Okay, sure. And there you go. I am christened master distiller. And I suppose, yeah, maybe at that time I was, at least 20 years into the business nearly. 20 plus years into the business, and perhaps without name, maybe I was, certainly as far as Angostura was concerned. Definitely. What can I say?
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, there was an interesting or first meeting at a famous London rum bar with a famous other rum celebrity. Can you tell us about?
Ooh, massive rum celebrity. I was shaking in my boots. We'd gone up to do the bar show, and Charles had arranged for me to do a little presentation at Trailer Happiness. And at that time, again, these are the very early days. That said, there were myself, one other person who completely goes from my mind, and the great Joy Spence. Now, by then, Joy wasn't quite as big as she is now, but in Europe, in the UK, definitely. And again, I would think Joy was chosen not only for her obvious extreme experience and skill, but she has personality. She has real personality. Now, I don't know, still, our personalities, anybody in the rum business, I don't care who you are. And there was I. But, I was just, you probably won't remember it because I was just a fly on the wall, hardly to be respected. But I had huge respect for her, still do. Not only obviously because she made great product, but she is an extraordinary rum ambassador to this day. And anybody who's that big a rum ambassador, competitor or not, respect, a lot of respect. We've met several times since then, but her experience, she can't remember anyone. And I don't expect her to, but let her know I have full respect for her.
Yeah.
There are other people in the business who I respect hugely, but top of the list. Fascinating at the time.
Right. And just as a side note for people who are watching this, our second to last interview was actually with Joy Spence, and if I remember correctly, she does in fact, I think, remember meeting you there. So
that was so long ago. Remarkable. We've met since then because, as you know, rum. The other big person in the rum business is obviously Ian Burrell, and on one of my trips up there, we became aware of the UK Rum Fest.
Right.
And the UK Rum Fest then became really I suppose, the mother of all rum fests, as far as I'm concerned. I got to attend a couple of those, and there was one where we had where Ian did a Guinness World Record rum tasting event, and it got me. Obviously, you can't do that without Joy Spence. So she was there as well, and it was a fascinating experience. We did a lot of good things.
Right. So now we're going to jump forward about 10 years or so. Those of us of a certain age remember 10 Cane rum, originally distilled in Trinidad. It was owned by LVMH,
yes,
and perhaps several years ahead of its time. Tell us a bit more about this project and your role in 10 Cane.
10 Cane rum. Oh, I just had a small part to play, but at the end of the day, on the ground, it had to happen. Obviously, at the higher levels, Angostura really decided to take this opportunity to work with a hugely respected, massive brand, which was LVMH, and someone within that organization thought it was time for a premium rum, and they were looking for somewhere to do it. They may have tried other places, but Angostura, being Angostura, we were able to facilitate in Trinidad the establishment of the distillery and really get things going. Not only the distillery, we were also packaging and aging and packaging the whole 9 yards. We had an excellent project manager who really was responsible for getting things on the ground, getting it done, and that happened. And then once it was done, somebody needed to liaise with them to to keep the rum running again, keep the rum running. Now, they hired a young man from France who was, well, my French was very rudimentary, so I was never going to run the place. But they hired a young man, chap called Matthew, who was here for a number of years, and he was obviously lead on that. But to facilitate everything, the cane farmers, analysis, this, that, and the other, and keeping the liaising with customs and all that sort of thing, which needed to be done. And I was very much involved in that. And even before that, during the stages, it was really fascinating to liaise with the people from LVMH. Again, here we are with a process which was they had obviously been working for some time on this, and when they came to Trinidad, they thought they knew what they were doing, made a few changes on the fly, brought in their own still, and different from anything we'd worked with before. So once again, new and exciting. And what can I say? I'm not sure where it ended up.
Yeah.
Interesting product, though, definitely.
Yeah. So I think I mentioned to you before. I do know where their stills ended up, though. They are in Puerto Rico now.
In Puerto Rico, and,
Yes.
and making rum.
They are making rum right now. It's a small distillery in Puerto Rico that I visited this past May. So there they are. They're still bright red and making rum. So.
And we had a complete with a mill, because this was fresh cane juice, and there was this mill that we managed to get. I'm not sure where that mill ended up, but yeah, the mill has gone somewhere else as well. But I think it is a mill, so there you go. It's
somebody's got it.
Yeah, somebody's got a mill somewhere. I must find out. I think I could possibly find out where it ended up.
Okay,
it's possible.
Okay, so now let's shift gears a little bit. Talk about WORSPA, since this is
about WORSPA, yes.
WORSPA section, yes. So Angostura in Trinidad, more technically, has been a WORSPA member for the entire 50 years. From your perspective, what are some of the benefits that the company and you even may have derived from being part of this greater organization of WORSPA?
Well, WORSPA, of course, is, again, you come together, and the first battles, like I said, I remember that they were dealing with was the whole question of what is rum. The Europeans, no doubt, and the whole EU, guided, shall we say, probably primarily by the French, had their own ideas of what was rum and what was not rum. And they were perhaps using the way Angostura makes its rum against us in an effort to hold us off and coming into Europe. So in the very early days, we had to prove that what we were making was rum. Mm. And I remember it's probably, I don't know, 80s, mid 80s at best, taking samples and for Mr. Gatliff to take with him to these meetings and say, this is what we're making. Why are you saying it's not rum? And those were the early battles with rum. Okay. Then as we moved on and the trading relations changed again, the Europeans again, probably to assuage their niggling feeling of being really nasty people, once they changed the trading arrangements again, they thought that they would come up with a different way of trying to support Caribbean rum makers, and in transitioning from just being sort of bulk rum suppliers into being bottle suppliers. And in their minds, there were sort of 5 key areas in which they were going to support distillers through a mechanism where basically it was a matching funds kind of thing. Right. Where I think it was environmental, education, technical, marketing, perhaps one other, but those were the areas where they would, hoping that we in the Caribbean would come up with projects which they could support in these areas, and they would supply matching funds so that when finally the old ACP arrangements were wound down completely, they felt that they had given us a bit of a leg up in preparation for the new environment in which we were working. And it was a fascinating experience. Again, here you are dealing with trade issues. You're looking at manufacturing. You're looking at packaging and labeling. You're looking at environmental, which was a big part of the whole thing. If you need to make changes there, and education generally, so that you would um, uh, improve the performance, hopefully, mostly in the distillery area or in packaging, aging, improve the way you did things in your operations. And there were any number of seminars that were held in the education um, side of things. They, I think, took the lead in the creation of the Caribbean rum mark.
Mhm.
They
The
said,
ACR, yes,
yeah,
authentic
yeah,
Caribbean rum, yes,
yeah, yeah,
yes, that was part of the overall Caribbean rum sector program, which you're
yes,
referring to.
yes,
So,
yes.
but yes,
And
go on.
it was, for some reason, their approach to the marketing thing was this: first of all, market as a group, and to use this rum mark. I suppose somewhere in their analysis of the situation, part of the challenge was whether or not people sort of felt that Caribbean rum, was a quality thing, something that really stood out. And
Yeah,
their strategy was to create this Caribbean rum mark to assure consumers that what they were enjoying was genuine Caribbean rum.
right.
And under the auspices of that uh, group arrangement, we attended any number of marketing opportunities and benefited, I believe, from using international uh, marketing uh, promotion companies in Europe to continue to drive it. There was a bit of a disconnect between the rum mark and the individual brands, and this is always going to be a challenge. There are, the individual brands wanted to sort of stand out, and the rum mark sort of was for everyone. So
Right.
it was useful. You got out there, you met people, you learned things. It was useful in that respect, most definitely. And for us, well, me personally, I was involved in a major um, warehouse revamping. One of our warehouses has an asbestos roof, and
Part
we
of
could
funds
very,
from the rum sector program
yeah,
to
ended up
help
there.
pay
Yeah,
into the warehouse. Okay.
yeah, and we got some packaging equipment and a lot of some marketing assistance. I mean, it was great for what it was, but um, yeah, my little bit is that it was still rough. You really needed to be a pretty. Worcester did the best they could in in that not all the Caribbean distilleries had the resources to meet the criteria that was often required in order to get these funds. And Worcester did a very good job at helping everyone along to access the funds that could be accessed. Because, like I said, you still have to meet some fairly miserable criteria in order to access the funds.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I'll note the ACR mark is still in use today. There are still brands that still put it on their
Yes.
bottles today. It's an ongoing program, and I think it sort of ties back to what you were mentioning earlier about the question of like what is rum, and I think that discussion is what helped form the CARICOM rum standard of basically saying in the Caribbean this is rum. So yeah,
This is wrong. Yes, yes, yes. Further to be further divided, in the different islands, or it's just a fascinating challenge that you delve into when you start that discussion. What is rum? Yeah, I've had some interesting discussions on that, but to be decided. To be decided.
okay. So, do you have any thoughts on where you think Caribbean rum is headed in the next 5 or 10 years? Like, where are you seeing things
Oh,
moving?
ah. Well, my problem with this is that I could never predict where things are going to be. I look at my career and I'm thinking when I started off, and I always say this is kind of fascinating that, I found myself drinking rum in a bar in Moscow, served by one of the most awesome bartenders who I had met in Trinidad, an Italian who I had met in Trinidad. And here we were drinking rum in a sky-high bar in Moscow. I'm thinking, come on. This gentleman served me the most amazing daiquiri, and I watched him make it. It was just unreal. My point, who knows where things are going to be? I can only be hopeful of where it will be. And if I had to create a sort of a vision for where I want it to be, I in my heart of hearts, I think rum is Caribbean, okay? Rum is Caribbean. And we must continue to develop that and settle for nothing less than being the elite as far as rum is concerned. In everybody's mind, they must know if you're going to drink a real rum, you come to the Caribbean. Now, that's many years from now, I think, perhaps. But it has to be it. You must come to the Caribbean to get elite rum. Other spirits have developed themselves to the point where, it's just, of course, same must happen for rum. And it depends on us committing to all the standards that are required and the mindset to maintain. And I like the premium end of the market. I like that side of things. I like that. I like the idea because I'm a rum guy. All cocktail people, don't worry about it. It's not that I don't like cocktails. For me, it's rum and nothing. Rum and water, rum and ice, rum and soda, nothing else.
I'm lucky that I love them both. So
yeah, no, I respect that because at the end of the day, there is a part which, it's integrated into the whole thing, and I'm all for it. Just me personally, but that's my idea is that we must somehow retain that pride of place of being, for all the dark history and all the around up and down that we have gone through, that we somehow are going to get a premium product out of this, recognized globally as coming from the Caribbean. And it's not just because we say so, because we say so, but there is real quality, continued innovation, even if, and we do all that we need to do environmentally and everything, for both physical and human environment. We do everything that we are just the premium, and that's what we need. That's what I'd like us to do.
So we have time for more. I have one more question for you, but before I jump into that, if anybody out there has questions for John, now is your time to jump in there. Don't put them in the ask a question tab, because if I ain't anything there when we're done, then we're going to sign off. So get your questions is now. Final question from me. So you're semi-retired from Angostura now, but still doing the occasional thing for Angostura. For example, hosting me when I came down there, which to my great fortune. What sorts of new directions and challenges are you doing now that you're not doing day-to-day rum making?
Well, really, as far as professionally is concerned, I really have to consider my next steps. But I'm still doing some work for Angostura, and for the time being, come on, remain loyal to this organization. My children, we all grew up, and it's in many ways Angostura has been part of that. So for the next year or so, I think I'm working with them, obviously continuing to promote spirits, and a couple other projects that I'm working on. I'm actually working on a little bitters thing there. Well, not little, big. And it's kind of interesting to be in bitters. I never really did a lot with bitters, but here we are. and that's also, again, fascinating and new. No, I am taking 5. I like all silly old men, power tools. I picked up a few power tools and I make some noise downstairs and come up with rickety old things.
So woodworking or
Yeah,
small
woodworking,
distilleries? Okay.
woodworking.
You're not building
For the
small
time being.
distilleries with your power tools.
No. That might be in the past. And of course we are. You know, my son is a pastry chef and a baker. So there you go. He's yeast again somewhere in the family. We're dealing with yeast, and so we're, you know, I haven't really made a decision yet, but I suspect it'll be around rum. It's the jobs lots to be done, lots to promote in terms of rum, and of course Angostura first, but we'll see.
Yeah, you know, and part of my role is to help elevate all the rum. So
there you go, and it's just that, you know, you there are lots of things that can happen. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, John, thank you for spending this time with us. It's like I said, it's always a joy to listen to you talk. Like, it's just like the most melodious voice and just great things. So I'm extraordinarily lucky to have you do this with us. So thank you for being on here,
Matt. Thank you very much. I'll end this, which is kind of weird, but where should it begin? Icon, I would hardly say that. I mean, I worked with some really fascinating people at all levels of the business, and from plant operators to mechanics, supervisors, lab people. Some of my superiors were all really helpful in doing this. Lucky breaks. There you go. I got to be, you know, out there in the world, and for a short while there, I was the face of Angostura, and that was a fascinating experience. So I'm grateful for everyone who supported me and backed me up, and yeah, definitely Angostura is an icon, and well, I got to get a little glory from that.
Yeah, well, it's too late now. You're officially an icon. So, all right, Will, do you want to take us out?
Yes, and just to echo everything Matt said, John, thanks so much for taking the time to share all your experiences and knowledge with everyone today. Thanks everyone for showing up and spending some time with us. Great comments throughout, some great memories and stories shared in there. So go back and check them out. Matt, anything planned in the future right now? Anyone else you're looking into that you can share?
We're working on it. So nothing to share yet, but we have more to go. So
excellent. Well, thanks again, everyone, and stay tuned. Watch your email for future announcements regarding the Icon series and other events from Worspa and Zavi. Thanks again for coming, and we'll see you next time.
okay.
Will,
Take care.
thank you very much, Matt.
Cheers.
Great to see you anytime. Check me out whenever you wish.
All right.
Excellent.
Cheers.
Thanks, Sean.
Bye.